What is going on, everybody? Happy Monday. Welcome into our latest Traded Black podcast powered by Dutchie. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Great show coming up here today. Michael Bronstein is going to come in off the top to talk about all this latest drama heading in Texas. And are we headed towards a more conservative approach regarding whatever outcome it is towards THC, a hot topic in Texas? We continue to have those conversations the last couple of weeks. Plus, Eric Berlin, one of the most respected cannabis attorneys, is coming back to Traded Black to talk about the announcement last week. Judge John Mulrooney announced his retirement. So what does this mean for the ALJ hearing? How should we interpret this? And what are some of the notable things that we should expect next? So that is going to be a key one here today and why you should be listening here to the Traded Black podcast. Let's welcome into AV here on a Monday. Good to see you, sir. Happy Monday. And this should be an interesting one. I'm, very excited and want to learn a lot from Eric as to what to expect, because some people think, in the event that there is rescheduling announced with President Trump, that'll probably most likely come through an executive order. So where does this leave the ALJ hearing? But some key questions that need to be asked. So I look forward to that, along with Michael giving us an update out of Texas.
Yeah, it'll be good to get Eric on, talk about what potentially the road ahead looks like, maybe some insight into why now did they decide to retire the ALJ. And really where this falls. I know that it was a big topic of conversation this morning that Terrence Cole laid out his priorities on Friday. Cannabis rescheduling was not on there. However, several of those priorities could segue. Cannabis rescheduling and legalizing cannabis or reforming cannabis would segue into those. I mean, they were talking about TCOs, cartels, money laundering, bunch of different stuff. Didn't blatantly call it out, but I didn't really expect it to be on there. Granted, it was contrary to what he said in his Senate testimony, saying that it would be one of his top priorities. That was basically the biggest point of conversation. This morning was two articles that were on Marijuana Moment and then Marijuana Herald regarding his true priorities.
Lots of things to juggle right now. And also, if you're still juggling multiple systems just to run your dispensary, that's a tough way to grow, Anthony. With Dutchie, you don't have to. They're all in one cannabis operating system, connects everything: point of sale, e-commerce, payments, loyalty, and more into one seamless platform. Again, over 6,500 dispensaries already trust Dutchie, and they're powering over $22 billion in annual sales. That kind of scale brings real insight, smoother workflows, and retail experience your customers can feel, whether they're shopping in person or online. One system, one partner, total visibility. Start future-proofing your dispensary now at business.dutchie.com. Did you like that?
That was smooth. That caught me out of nowhere. That was smooth. That was smooth. That was good.
I'm trying to copy the Barstool Sports guys. They're so good at when it comes to
that. I was not expecting that. As soon as you went in with that, I was like, oh shit. Here we go. That was good.
Anyways, so if you're a retail owner, make sure, like I said, to visit business.dutchie.com. And we did a little piece between them and Ascend Wellness on Friday. Yeah. But there's some great loyalty programs, and they've got all the data to set that up. So anyway, we'll see that. Dutchie getting their money's worth, says Chad, thanks. Yeah, it's a great segue. All right, let's get into it. Today's show, let's welcome back our best friend of the podcast, the president of the American Trade Association, Michael Bronstein. Good to see you, sir. Happy Monday. Off the top of the show, you've been promoted. How are things?
No, listen, things are good. I'm glad I was promoted. I'm happy to promote our good friends at Dutchie, who have a great product.
Nice.
So I think our watchers, listeners should check them out.
Yeah. Let's have you on and get straight to it. Lots going on in Texas over the last week. A lot of these session hearings. What do you make of everything right now? And you and I were like off camera last night talking and texting back and forth. You mentioned a couple of things that this could be a more conservative approach, and we could see actually some changes. And yes, we're definitely going to see some changes, but maybe if you want to elaborate, like, what are you thinking and seeing right now and feeling on what you've been hearing over the past 4 or 5 days as to what's transpiring in Texas right now?
Yeah, look, it may scare some folks that we talk off camera, but we do every once in a while. We're not conspiring against you guys, by the way.
Yeah.
In Texas, and we were going back and forth about this yesterday. It's interesting. We're seeing a lot of different things develop in Texas, and over the last week, even since we last talked. Okay, last week we saw a poll that was released and also around the Texas legislature, which talked about banning synthetic THC products. And it was interesting in that in the poll that was being circulated around the legislature and was also reported upon, is that you had a majority of everybody, Republicans, Democrats, independents, in there saying, yeah, that's what should happen. And we've seen that. So you're asking the question a little bit differently. And in Texas, what we saw, and we talked a little bit about this last time, was that when they pulled straight legalization, they got a different answer than they got from polling, all right, what should we do with synthetic THC products?
Yeah.
Okay. And
is that a surprise?
It's not a surprise to me. I think what it does is it validates kind of the pathway that they're moving, this very narrow pathway that they're moving with Texans. And the legislature, I don't think is as far ahead in terms of where legalization is with a lot of Texans and stuff like that. But they are, from the public health and safety issues, gravitating more towards that. And what we haven't seen is we've seen politicians. I don't think that anybody has a sense right now in the state, in the legislature, 100% about the product and what's going on.
Right.
What it is that they're saying about these different things, right? Because we saw the governor also say, so governor says, all right, we'll do 3 milligram because it's a non-intoxicating product.
Yeah.
But all of us here know that a 3 milligram serving size product can absolutely be intoxicating.
You can also take 3 of them and bring it up to a 9 milligram dose that absolutely is intoxicating.
Absolutely. And that's just the serving size. So really what we need, though, is we need people to get educated on this. It doesn't do anyone any good. It doesn't do the governor any good if he thinks that, okay, this is a non-intoxicating level and he wants to regulate that way. And we say, well, actually, it's what if we say now, oh, you're right, 3 milligram serving size. You're right. It's not intoxicating. Wink, nod, nod. Right.
So question.
Yeah.
I see a lot of CEOs in the hemp space talking about Texas. A lot of them talking about the future of Texas. A lot of them having very strong opinions on what the future of the Texas industry should be. Why have they not taken the chance, or why have they not made it a paramount issue to educate the legislatures that are swinging the pendulum that's going to dictate their fate on the products and on how the industry should look moving forward? To me, that's kind of like step one.
Yeah.
Would be to make sure that the judge, jury, and executioner that my fate resides in are well educated on how they need to regulate this.
So there are a couple things with that. One is a lot of the folks are in the legislature. So figure, like, let's say cannabis usage rates. Let's look at cannabis usage rates across the United States amongst adults, right? What is it, 10%, 12%? High, like, of people who are using regularly, right? So like folks don't necessarily in these areas have the experience. If you ask, well, how many people drink alcohol, right? Yeah. And like you have a lot of folks, all right, well, I know I drink alcohol, I do this, or maybe I did drink it, I don't drink it anymore. Or even what I found in a legislature is I'll talk to someone who, they've used cannabis, but they haven't used it in 40 years. And they're like, the stuff that I was using back when I was in college, like this is sort of like what this is, right? And they separate out that experience from what a regulated market should look like. Mm-hmm. So that education level, you could show people everything, but if they're not actually like using the product or they don't have like an understanding of that, it's very hard to be like, okay, it's the difference between talking to someone about how they should know how to drive, even though they've never been behind the wheel of a car, or like talking to them had they been behind that wheel. That's sort of like number one. Okay. That's the issue, right? Number two is education. I think that there's been a lot, because there's political disagreement about what the solution should be, that the advocacy that's gone on around it, I'd say, has not been kind of factual in nature from an education perspective. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just saying, like, all right, you're in a firefight and you're in the legislature. Maybe you agree one side, maybe you agree the other side. That's not like the best spot where everybody's like, here's the set of facts that we all agree on. Now let's like argue about the thing that let's argue about the stuff that we're talking about from a policy perspective. Correct. So, and then folks who are totally against this, reefer madness, that type of thing, you're not going to get a logical argument from those folks to begin with about where that market should begin with. So all of these things sort of bleed together in front of a legislature, and it creates a lot of confusion.
Very.
Has there been dialogue around the bill that actually made common sense that would just turn the hemp industry into an adult use, state regulated industry, or that kind of just go by the wayside and everyone's focused more on the bans?
There essentially has been, there's been a legalization bill that was filed in Texas, but I don't think that legalization could muster the votes in the near term to be able to do something, which is the logical thing that should happen. So then all of a sudden you're like, all right, well, I've got hemp cannabinoid products, and folks who are doing beverages have a different view than folks. And by the way, it's totally right that these folks have different views. I'm not saying that just because they have different views, right? They do have legitimately different interests where you have, all right, I've got beverage, maybe I've got hemp cannabinoid products that I'm selling in the market. The way that you view those things is different. So there is an agreement. There isn't agreement upon that, right? If you're a beverage and you're like, well, it's a beverage, guys. Like, you drink alcohol, you know what this looks like. Why don't we just stick this in let's put it ABC, let's do liquor. You know what I mean? Let's do it the way we do liquor, right? That's an easier argument than it is to be like, all right, I'm making X, Y, and Z product, and let's be able to sell it through these types of things. That's a different argument. And then to pile on top of that, you've got folks who are like, all right, I need a certain level of THC in the product because I have a medical product or a product that's used that's a non-intoxicating product potentially, but everybody, everybody's looking to everybody on the other side is looking to create an additional loophole.
But can't they just mandate that that's what the Teacup program is for? If you want to sell those products in Texas and you want to get in front of patients with a medical, granted the Teacup program sucks, so they would need to expand and optimize that program. But the clear argument there is, guys, we have Teacup, we have medical marijuana in Texas. If you want, or you need from a patient perspective, a heavy dose of THC or these specialized cannabinoid products, that's what the Teacup program is there for.
Yeah, that's where we're. I think that's where we're headed. We're hearing a lot of those arguments on the ground. We're hearing a lot of those arguments on the ground right now because the things that are more at risk. When I say at risk, I mean from a regulatory capture perspective. I don't mean like, okay, they're riskier products or something like that.
Right.
Those things are much more likely to wind up on Teacup than they are in the open, in a more loosely in a more loosely regulated.
I think that's where it's good. If I was a betting man, I would be betting that you're going to see low dose edibles and beverages in Texas. THCA flower is gone. Vapes are gone. Synthetics are gone. Maybe they allow Delta 8 in edible form, and everything else, you're going over to Teacup if you want those products. I don't necessarily think that's the best solution, but that's where if I was betting, I would bet that that's where this ends up.
Is that realistic, Michael?
Pretty close to that.
I think it's real. I think it's something akin to that is realistic. Okay. It may not, it could approximate that type of thing, right? But something like that is more realistic, way more realistic than say, okay, now we're going to have adult use cannabis, right? Masked as a adult use hemp program. Call it whatever you want, right? In Texas. And then also have kind of, because now they're thinking about it holistically. It's given them a little bit more time to think about it holistically because there was a lot of backlash. You had the expansion of the Teacup program, okay? And then it's like, well, wait a second, we expanded it. Can we even do more potentially on there? Like if you're talking about medicine, and then I think in the legislature, they're like, why is anyone talking about a ban if they're talking about medicine when they could show up in the, I'm just giving you what they say. Like we could show up in the Teacup program and get medicine. Like it's rubbing folks the wrong way in the legislature when you argue that these products are for medical need. And
Correct.
then it's like, okay, well, if they are for medical need, why should we allow them to be sold outside of a medical,
Right.
outside of a medical score? Like that, we want to be able to create access. Why don't we just do it like
is
that?
A valid argument. It's a valid argument, but at the same time, I think if Texas had a medical program that looked like Florida, I don't even think this would be a conversation right now. They would just go ahead, do the low dose edibles and THC. Hemp is gone, and then everybody can transact from a medical perspective in the Teacup program. The problem is then you can also get into the argument that they don't. The Teacup program doesn't sufficiently provide cannabinoids to patients, which I'll be the first to admit that it doesn't. I mean, if you really look into it, like it's a pretty onerous, very inaccessible program for Texans. So if they want to be able to have that compromise and divert people towards the Teacup program, they need rapid resources and expansion that they're kind of chomping at the bit at right now, but they're not really all the way there. They're nowhere near all the way there.
What are we looking at as timeline wise right now? Like, are we any closer after last week's discussions? Because it seems like we're going in 18 different directions.
We're closer in that more time has elapsed since last week, in the sense that we're closer to the end of it. My view is this is going to come down to the wire.
Yeah.
And it's not the only issue. It may not be. No one's talking about how there might be another session, but that's not really, folks are not talking about this. This is not really what's being talked about. So, but what I'll say to you is like, there are enough issues here. Like, all right, well, we got to start talking about redistricting. Okay. Redistricting as an issue is like so much more important from a political perspective, just politics, not like the us or whatever, the world, but like from a political, our world, right? From a political perspective, who controls the U.S. House by redrawing districts? That's like, all right, who gets what and when, and who controls power?
They're trying to do in Florida too.
Conversation, right? That's the type of conversation, like a mid-cycle redistricting conversation is like that will take up time. Right. If people are leaving the state, if this becomes, and this has happened in Texas before, people have left the state, right, on redistricting. Okay. And then, by the way, you're seeing other states contemplate doing in-cycle redistricting. These other Democratic governors are saying that, partially in response to what is going on in Texas, because they fear that there could be additional seats that are drawn that could change the power in Congress. So like a lot of those things are stuck together. Do you get to a spot where there's a stasis on THC and a conversation with like that going on? I don't know. I mean, that's kind of the issue there. I do think that they're going to come to some resolution. I actually do think they're going to come to some resolution.
And what is that? What is that?
Well, I think you're going to get the when is it, or how is it, or what? What is it?
What is it?
You pick it. What is it? I think it's a more conservative approach. I think it's what
does that look like?
I think it's something like what Anthony described, akin to what he described, is probably not exactly what it will look like, but something as to what it'll look like. I mean, we're already seeing in the House just introduced a bill, like an identical bill to SB3. What was SB3 in the Senate. So you're starting to see you're starting to see a little bit of a walk back from what the discussion was, right? Like there was a lot of sort of like, all right, there was a veto. Now we're going to get now we're going to get something. I think that we're going to see something more. I think we're going to see something more conservative. I don't think it's going to be quite, what the bill that came out that was vetoed was, but you're going to see a more limited. I think you're going to see a more limited market. You may also see some level of, all right, well, there should be expansion in these other, in these other areas, because I just don't see how you get to, it's Texas, right? I don't see how you get to that. Like, and by the way, the argument that like, okay, well, it's about business and like folks are making a lot of money right? Like at the end of the day, I still think that public health and safety is driving a lot of the conversation, whether it be misguided or not, depending on how you fall down on the issue. There is this backdrop to this, which is why I think you know, when you see polling on, you know, synthetics, why it's sort of, you know, it polls differently than if you're talking about, you know, you're talking about straight legalization or regular.
This whole conversation though is kind of null redone, which is kind of also what not a lot of people are talking about. Because if that gets redone and that gets shut down, or that appropriations language passes, it's in that spending bill that Rand Paul right now is just vehemently against. I mean, this is that'll be federal policy shifts towards hemp.
Yeah, and your states would still have the ability to put policies in place. I think, you know, preserve a state right principle on legalization. But like that to me is something that I think is coming. You know, maybe it comes now, maybe it comes later. You know, but the way that things are right now is not going to be the way that things are later. I mean, that is the nature of the regulation. And I think what we have now is a large portion of the market just trying to fight against any type of change, because the way that it's going on right now, it's like there's no regulatory environment.
It's great
in a lot of places.
It's great. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and lie. I mean, the environment for an entrepreneur in Texas in the hemp industry is fantastic.
Yeah.
You can make as much money as you want right now, and there's no regulations. It's great, but I do think it's coming to a close.
Yes. Short-lived. You mentioned public polling, and it's being used as a political tool, I think, right now. So does this poll, I guess, in some ways signal a shift in political strategy? Or is it more of a media pressure tactic, do you think, right now?
I think it's just like this polling basically, I think, validates a lot of the discussions that are happening behind the scenes. To me, it's just justification of, okay, well, other folks, you know, are thinking about this, and we have a, you know, it validates some of the discussions that are happening from a legislative perspective. You know, you have folks like, you know, the poll banning language doesn't poll well. Obviously you start polling, and then when you start drilling down into it, synthetics, right? People don't want synthetics in their program. So to me, it's like, it's a lagging, it's not a leading indicator. It's more of a lagging indicator of where, because I don't think people necessarily knew where the public was when they closed out this bill last time. You know, they heard from industry, but like, you know, and they heard from veterans groups, you know, but like, this is so divided right now in a lot of ways. That's why it's like, I don't know what to predict as to what's going to happen to the outcome of this, but
go ahead, Chad.
I was just going to say, like, we saw how Governor DeSantis took things personal, I think, in a lot of ways, when it came to Amendment 3. Do you think the same is happening between Patrick and Abbott, and how this has become very divided in a lot of ways, and in some ways has become personal between the two? Yeah.
It's politics. You can never remove the personality out of politics. And sometimes if you have to ask, like, well, why did this law happen? Or why is this thing the way that it is? Well, it's because somebody stood in the way and said, no, this is the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
Okay. And there was a deal that was cut at that time. But I don't think Patrick has said everything. Like, he has been like, no THC, 000. This is like where it's going to be. Well, they get to the end of this session and they need to do something or leave it the same. I got to feel like they're going to do something as opposed to just leave it the same. Because if you leave it the same, all right, well, he's just sort of making the arguments, and you never get to a spot where there's any regulatory clarity over it, which I think is totally untenable.
So whatever is going to be decided, we're probably looking around the third week of August. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So I'm going to
throw. It started the 21st.
this is what we do in the media industry. We like to just throw hypotheticals out there. So in the event that we get a rescheduling announcement between now and before that, how does this change things? Because I know it's federal versus state, but does that change the perception? I know Anthony's shaking his head going, why are you going there? But I've got to throw it out there. But does this change the perception of how they're viewing a lot of these things? And if so, what kind of impact would that have?
It's such a wild card. It is. It's such a wild card because the thing is, at the state level, rescheduling is going to mean a lot. It is actually a meaningful difference. And we could all say, all right, we want more, right? Which we do. We want more. But as a first step, there's so many Republican legislators that I've talked to that have said, if there is something that happens at the federal level, I think about this issue differently than I think about this issue right now. And
that would happen overnight.
Yeah, you could get you could get an announcement and things change, especially if the messaging is carried the right way forward. Things change politically like that.
Yeah.
That's one of the situations where, okay, it's a fact point to the American public and to a lot of the American public that's not necessarily for legalization right now. Like you have the government saying, you know what, this isn't as dangerous as we said schedule as it's scheduled right now. It's not. Okay, we're gonna move it to 3. It's not legal, okay, but it's also not 1. All right, and I think that from a harm reduction standpoint and from a policy standpoint, it changes. Look at the way the enforcement targets are for Schedule 1 as opposed to like going down the schedule. Schedule 3. Like, you get a little bit of a different idea of what that looks like. And to us, we're like, oh well, that. Like, why are we even talking about this? Like, we're in legal cannabis states right now. There's legalization basically broadly across the country with pockets.
But here's the thing.
Where it's not.
That adult use legalization and we'll call it the adult use hemp industry still look very, very different. They're not apples to apples. There's no congruency there. That's the problem. That's the main problem, is the fact that you have adult use cannabis. Let's just use the state of California as an example, and the hemp industry in the state of Texas. They are governed, and they are the applicable laws to each of those ecosystems is vastly different. Meanwhile, they're doing the same thing. They're selling the same product.
Well, I guess the question is, do you think that this is a plant industry or is it a molecule industry? Right? Like, I don't think it really answered that.
It should be a molecule industry. It should be THC. Delta 9 THC is Delta 9 THC.
So if you were talking to DEA, look, if you were talking to DEA, what DEA would tell you is, I don't care where the molecule came from. We regulate by molecule. We enforce by molecule.
Which would be better.
Right? The issue that we have here is that the production of these molecules that's going on are not up to a standard to where when you talk about regulating by molecule, we're kind of in a spot where you can get that. And what we have is a semi-synthetic or synthetic drug market that's popped up adjacent to an industrial hemp industry.
Yes.
But does that synthetic market even come to be or flourish if we had congruent and common sense regulations around that molecule? I don't think so.
I agree.
I don't think we're looking at HHC and THCP and Delta Zero and all this crap if we had congruent, common sense regulation around that Delta 9 THC molecule.
Mm-hmm. Certainly not in legal channels, but I mean, couldn't you see a day where it's like, all right, we have marijuana legalization at the federal level, but then you find that people are selling THCP because it gets you an X multiple higher than it would. I think, you're going to see them like you are going to, and that's what you have to account for in enforcement and regulation.
You're right.
So, I hate to even say this, but I mean, the only common sense thing to do there would be to just put them all on damn things on Schedule 1, like they're doing with the analogs, the street analogs of fentanyl. Put them all on Schedule 1 and give them max penalties. If you're dealing THCP or you're selling HHC out of your establishment, fuck off. You are going to get the book thrown at you. Like, that stuff is no longer welcome in society. You want to get high and you want to use cannabinoids and you want to use them for medicine and recreational purposes, we have descheduled and legalized Delta-9 THC. Like, there's plenty of derivatives of that are good, that are fine.
You may see that. I mean, that may be the thing that you see. I mean, you still have this idea out there that synthetic derivatives are Schedule 1. Not to go too down the rabbit hole. I mean, but the thing is like, all right, well, you're looking at those. So it's like, all right, well, you're going to isolate those compounds. This is why you kind of have folks who are in different, like you look at traditional pharma, right? And you look at a nutraceutical industry, right? And if you look at the cannabis industry, you actually are capturing everything from pharmaceutical development on down to products that could be sold potentially over the counter, right? Or even as recreational products. That's what makes this so interesting.
The funny thing is, if you go up and down the west coast of Florida, who do you think is pivoted to creating, manufacturing, and white labeling THC synthetics that are being sold into the hemp channels? All the big nutraceutical manufacturers, they've all flipped into synthetic THC derivative companies that are just postering everything under the guise of hemp.
There's no question. And look, I think that the way that laws are oriented, it has to do with enforcement and the way that enforcement would have to happen. It's interesting because at the federal level, some of the things that the cannabis industry on a state legal basis is covered by from funding going against that state legal is probably things that are also holding up enforcement mechanisms potentially on another level, because they're also deprioritized from they're deprioritized in terms of regulatory enforcement. I remember, like, at the beginning of the industry, I remember meeting with an attorney and they said, look, the line of legality and illegality goes out to infinity. It's where on that line enforcement stops,
right?
That legalization happens. It's a very interesting thought.
Yeah. Well, whatever happens here, it's going to be a proxy, I think, for other conservative states. How many other states do you think are following this closely as to what's the outcome here and what kind of ripple effect could it have?
I don't think that, like, the states per se don't follow it in real time closely, in my view. I think what happens is after they do something, then what happens in the next state, they go, oh, well, look at what Texas did. Look at what Pennsylvania did. Look at what Illinois did. Look at what Florida did, right? And then it becomes conversation for what those things are, and then it becomes a mirror in some states.
Yeah. And Tom, the argument is not automatically hating around synthetics. With you using ibuprofen and MDMA as examples, no one's sitting here saying that Epidiolex is bad, that Epidiolex shouldn't be around. It's the synthetic cannabinoids that are within the hemp industry that cause or could potentially cause a public safety issue, which are the ones that are just orders of magnitude stronger, and they've just become an alphabet soup of everything and anything that goes into vapes within hemp. No one's saying ban synthetics in totality.
I think one of the interesting things too is like, all right, well, synthetics, we talk about synthetics. Okay. Like Delta-8 appears naturally on, it appears naturally in hemp at a very low level, right? Yeah. What most of us would agree is not a commercial level, right? Well, how many people, are sitting in jail historically for having created Delta-8? Delta-8, all right, remember, when people equate this with prohibition, it wasn't Delta-8 that was prohibited.
Yeah. Right?
That's not what it was. It was natural cannabis. Right. So it's like, did we get into this and we're like, all right, we're going to free all these synthetic molecules, right? What as a movement did we do? Were we like, all right, we're going to free all of these molecules, or was it, we're going to free the plant, right? And we're going to legalize marijuana, the thing that people had been punished for.
Yeah.
Over the years. I mean, and I think that's really more of a philosophical discussion from an industry perspective. And, on top of that, should it be a natural product that's being provided to the public, right? Or not? And I think that when you get into the world of synthetics, or you get into the world of analogs, right? You're kind of getting into you're getting into a bit of a different conversation, I think, than folks may be ready to have at this point.
Yep. Well, all eyes on Texas again this week as we try to get some sort of clarity. But long story short, there was a lot to take in last week, but a little bit of clarification from you here today. But let's keep in touch. If we have some any news regarding any updates this week, let's get you back on. But in the meantime, let's thanks for checking in and giving us an update. And if you were watching one or two specific things this week for a viewer standpoint, what's one thing you want to, I guess, be paying attention to?
Certainly watching Texas, also watching federally, some of the discussion that's going on around language federally in terms of hemp definitions is something that, we continue to watch, continue to watch Pennsylvania with what's going to go on there. So there are a lot of hot topics that probably are going to continue to be discussed over the next couple of weeks.
Summertime. Who says it's slow this time of period, other this time of year in this industry, right?
It's hot in Austin. I'll give you that.
Oh, it's hot where I'm at too. But anyway, have a good week. And if we, like I said, have any news that we need to talk about, let's get you back on later this week. If not, we'll see you back here next Monday. Okay.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for having
me.
me.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it. All right. Insider's Edge presented by the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp. Michael Bronstein giving us some clarification on what's transpired the last couple of days in Texas. Great dialogue that you guys had back and forth there. But I think you made some valid points that, in the event that they actually ever legalize cannabis, there's going to be other loopholes that people are going to try selling on the street. But like you said, they should just deem it as Schedule I drugs and have hefty fines, because these are going to be so many incremental steps to get where it is today to like what is a proper regulated market. And I know there's a lot of people with a lot of different ideas right now in a room, and you just got to sit back and observe. But I think we're trying to figure everything out. That's going to take years in the making, and everybody just has an idea that they want to have a quick solution right away. But as soon as one door opens, another door closes, and that's just the reality of this industry right now.
Yep, absolutely. Tilray's out, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get into that right after. Let's now segue into our second segment. We're going to talk a lot about, let's face it, Terrence Cole nominated as or invoked last week as DEA Administrator. And just a day or two afterwards, Judge John Mulrooney, the ALJ hearing who's overlooking, which many people are familiar with that watch this and follow the space closely, he announced his retirement. So what's next? With that, let's welcome in one of the leading, if not the leading cannabis attorney in the country, Eric Berlin from Dentons. Good to see you, sir. Happy Monday. How are things?
Things are good. Nice to see both of you. I hope you've both been doing well. Summer's been going well for you, and everything with me is good. Plugging away.
Yeah, it's a busy time, that's for sure. And that's, I think, a good thing for the space, because traditionally, as I said before, it's usually a quiet time. But we got the news last week that Judge John Mulrooney is indeed retiring. This was announced just a day or 2 days after Terrence Cole was appointed to becoming the official DEA Administrator. So was this designed, do you think, or to clear the deck for the Cole-led conclusion, or these are just two separate issues and people really shouldn't read too much into this? Like, how are you interpreting this, and what's next for the ALJ hearing, if anything at all?
Well, I suspect there are two separate issues, and I don't think that John Mulrooney was holding on to his retirement for that. Yeah. I'm a little delayed. Is that coming out okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yep. You're okay. Yep.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So listen, I wish John Mulrooney well in his retirement. I don't think there's any overall conspiracy about his retirement. Man wanted to retire and served a super long time and was ready for that. And there may not be a replacement for him in the near term. It's not like there's a stable of ALJs, administrative law judges, and this administration is not that fond of ALJs. That has been made clear. It may not matter, in my opinion. And we all have discussed this before, that President Trump and his administration can reschedule marijuana as is defined under the Controlled Substances Act to Schedule 3 outside of the hearing process. And so, in a way, I view all of these as non-events. Okay. I mean, it's eventful when someone retires. I don't mean it that way. I mean, in terms of the actual rescheduling, I don't think we need a hearing. I think Terry Cole has made it clear that this is among the priorities starting out. And so this can all happen without Mr. Mulrooney in the seat as an ALJ. I do want to address one thing on the subject of priorities, because there's a lot of press coming out that like, oh, well, Terry Cole then issued his priorities and they don't include cannabis, but those were enforcement priorities. Yeah. Cannabis is not, I mean, we should be happy that cannabis wasn't on that list. I mean, the priorities there were dismantling the Mexican cartels, eradicating the chemical supply for fentanyl, combating drug-related violence. And those are about enforcement and public safety. And I see rescheduling cannabis, on another list of priorities.
So that's a good
I wasn't
thing,
alarmed to see a separate list that did not include cannabis. That is not to say that I think, this is an August something, right? I mean, it's not urgent like that, but I think the notion that that the examination rescheduling and coming to a conclusion on that can be something that happens relatively quickly. And the retirement of John Mulrooney does not mean that this is, going to be on the back burner for 5 years.
Yeah.
If the executive branch were to reschedule cannabis, do you think that opens it up to a greater probability of legal challenges versus if we went through the ALJ and went through the formal rulemaking process?
Well, I mean, the three of us on here, there's one group that's been the principal opponent of rescheduling, and I anticipate they'll file a lawsuit no matter what happens, whether there's a basis for it or not. And I don't think any path changes the likelihood of one being filed. And then how it happens moving forward impacts, the whether that would possibly have any traction. And there's just as likely to be small procedural bumps in the road in a hearing that would form the basis of an appeal of that as much as there would be doing it without a hearing. So I sort of put them equal.
Yeah. Okay. Eric, what do you make of all this? It just seems like a lot of attention that we're getting from people even outside of the space over these past 30 to 60 days. Have you been paying attention to it? We've spoken to a lot of people in the industry, and they feel it feels different this time. I don't want to try to imply anything because look, you look at things as either yes or no. It's just like, is this going to happen or it's not going to happen? But it's interesting to see the amount of tension and momentum that's building around this topic right now. Is it not?
So I think it is, but I try to be careful because I've tried to read tea leaves various times and it doesn't always add up. But I think it's interesting. And I think that we've reached a point where this is by no means a fringe issue.
Right.
This industry is, whether it's federally approved or not, very important medically to a lot of people in this country. A lot of people who had trouble sleeping before now can sleep because of cannabis, and they would say take this, you don't get to take this away from me. And then the economic financial side has become more clear over the years, and I think in many ways it's not a clear culture war partisan issue that it used to be. And a lot more people have interest from a lot of different degrees. And from everything I've heard,
Yep.
President Trump has heard from a lot of people who have told him that they had a lot of aches and pains or trouble sleeping, and they're using gummies to help treat that with great success. And I think that has greater friction, rather traction, than it might have had 10 years ago, for example.
Yeah, I do too. We had Weldon Angelos on last week, and he was telling us about there was actually a gentleman from Michigan that was operating a company, and when the Cole memo was rescinded back in 2016, I think it was around that timeline, Anthony, if I'm correct, but he was operating legally, and when the Cole memo was rescinded, basically he had to spend 16 years. He spent 8 years already in jail for what's happened, and I can't help but think some of these stories that are being communicated to President Trump, he seems like a common sense law and order type person, but, makes things feel like, there could be something done. But long story short, with this ALJ hearing, I don't think there was really much momentum once the new administration came in. And from that, I think this, in a lot of ways, do you think will we hear anything regarding this hearing anymore, especially now that the judge has retired? Like, do you think this is just dead on arrival?
I don't know the answer to that. It's certainly possible that a hearing will get reinstituted. I mean, the hearing exists, to be clear.
Yeah.
It hasn't been pulled off the books. It's just that there's no really administrator of the DEA to rule on the appeal. And now there's no ALJ to report to. So, I wouldn't say it's dead, but it's in a weird situation. And I think this all just, again, from the way that I was looking at it, it felt before, during, and after unnecessary that we have this hearing. And I talked to you all before about the various reasons that this could be done, that President Trump can do it without, but also the fact that, is there even an opponent that has not engaged with illegal ex parte communications with the DEA and is actually an interested party? Does one exist for them to continue a hearing? And I guess, to me, the greatest point is I just don't know that it matters.
Yeah.
I think everyone in some ways has moved on from the hearing and is ready for the administration to do something outside the hearing, which, as I said, they absolutely can do. Mm-hmm. So that is the hope, but I cannot rule out that it just stagnates, right?
Yeah.
It's another situation that it just sits there and basically nothing happens. And in 6 months, you and I are having the same conversation, and 6 months from there, the same conversation. I don't know, but I just want to be clear that that's certainly a possibility, but not the one that I think is the most likely at this point.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing I got that way is just, Terrence Cole, I should say, not mentioning the rescheduling of cannabis based on his list that he outlined last week was actually a good thing. And I think there was a lot of comments here where people said, thanks for the clarification. That was more based on enforcement. And that's a good thing that rescheduling cannabis was not included on that. So that's the main point, I think, out of this interview today that we can get out of this. And really, people shouldn't read too much into that, but appreciate, obviously, the clarification on that. So it's an interesting time for the space, don't you think?
It's a very interesting time for the space. A lot going on for tail end of July, moving into August, right? You have what's going on in Texas. There's continuing discussion in Pennsylvania, whole host of things happening on the federal level. And then the fall's not far away. I don't mean to declare a premature end to summer. Sorry about that. But the fall is not that far away, and we'll be in the thick of all of it again.
So last thing I'll ask you, in the event that the Trump administration were to announce rescheduling, how would that work? How would that be announced? Would it be in an executive order? How exactly would that be? I guess what's the process involved in something like that if it were to happen? And I want to emphasize on that.
Yeah, sure. Just speaking hypothetically, I think that the DOJ could revoke the notice of proposed rulemaking, which would moot the hearing, and the DOJ itself could issue the final order. I mean, that could happen. We've discussed how that could happen under Section 811D. So that certainly could happen. But, and there are other options administratively. I also think it's a chance it could just be by executive order, because the president very much likes to do things by executive order. Mm-hmm. So there could be an executive order with the need to do certain things administratively following that. So I think it could be any of those options at this point.
Yeah, well, like you said, it's an interesting time in the space for a July and then into an August. But good seeing you, my friend, and glad you got a chance to connect. I know we reached out to you this morning, but glad that we are able to turn this around real quick. So let's keep in touch, because I know there's going to be a lot on the table these next couple of weeks as the industry starts to progress. And, you know, we're talking about Texas and even Pennsylvania to see what's going on with stuff there. But like you said, it's not a boring time in the industry right now, and we'll see what happens in the fall. But more importantly, let's keep in touch, okay?
I love that, and really good to talk to you, and congrats on the good work you're doing to
appreciate it.
Figure all this out and deliver good content, and happy to help again. So
yes,
don't hesitate to ask.
Well, we love thought leaders like yourselves that are on, but appreciate it, Eric. Let's keep in touch, okay?
You bet. Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, that was everybody asking what's not a priority for Terrence Cole, and then in 15 seconds he mentions something and it clears the air for everything.
Yeah, I mean, the cannabis enforcement's not a I didn't realize that, and I didn't really draw those lines after reading it. So I mean, it's great for Eric to clarify that. But I mean, yeah, I didn't draw those parallels either. That was a list of enforcement priorities, and cannabis enforcement's not a priority of the DEA. He mentioned TCOs. Or transcontinental or transcriminal organizations, cartels, money laundering, the laundry list of things that had to do with national security issues, as well as the cartel and Chinese gang initiatives and fentanyl, which is paramount to enforcement at the DEA moving forward.
All makes sense as you start to learn to have these conversations. But like we always say here at TDR, we like to set the narrative. And when you have guests on like that, that's exactly what they did right there, what he did, and both Michael and Eric today. Good conversations. I did see a couple comments. Tilray selling off here after hours. Did you get a chance to see
I don't think it's selling off.
Numbers?
It's down a penny. It's not selling off. I mean, the net revenue was like 2% off quarter over quarter. Their beverage revenue was down big due to SKU rationalization, and they attributed that to Project 420, which they attributed to a decline in their revenue. Not sure how they could potentially have a decline in cannabis beverages with what's going on. I've got to listen to the conference call. It doesn't look that bad at face value. I'll listen to the conference call and I'll have a write up on it in the newsletter for tomorrow morning. I don't have a grasp on it enough to just start to ramble on about it right now.
All right. Good stuff. Anthony Coniglio is going to be coming on with us on Wednesday. That'll be interesting. And what are we talking about, Mr. Coniglio? Any hooks or little sneak peeks that you want to tee people up?
I don't. I will leave it up to Wednesday.
Good stuff. And then I'm trying to think if we have anybody else scheduled for this upcoming week. We've got big earnings season coming up. A lot of people confirmed. Boris, Jim Cacioppo. We've got Bina Goldenberg trying to arrange things with the Verano people. So don't blink now, but next week is August already.
Yep. Friday's August.
You're right. Friday is August. Earnings season kicks off next week. So
yeah, I think it's August 5th and 6th when it starts to go off.
No sign of Kim Rivers yet, but we will try and reach out to Kim and see if we can get her on as well. But should be a big lineup of this should be a telling earnings season, I think. And traditionally with 420 during that quarter, we'll see what happens. But Q2 is always usually a pretty strong quarter. But you and I were talking about that earlier today. But all eyes will be on, earnings season and what that means. But Lots on the go right now. Got Pennsylvania, the rescheduling rumors, Texas, and then, like I said, earnings season. So a lot going on these next couple of weeks. So make sure everybody stays connected. In the meantime, AV, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, everybody, as well.
Sure.
Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thanks for logging in. And as well, if you are a dispensary owner, make sure to visit business.dutchie.com to learn more. Take care, everyone. We'll see you back here Wednesday at 4. Have a good day. So, what'd you think of all that information? Some interesting stuff that we just learned once again here at the TDR Traded Black podcast. Let's keep the conversation going. So leave your comments below. We'd love to get your feedback. As usual, if you have time, make sure to like, subscribe, and smash on that bell for all notifications. And stay connected with us here at the Trade to Black podcast. Thanks for watching, everyone.